Kia ora everyone, and welcome to this afternoon session looking at the health curriculum in Phase 5, the last one in our Phase 1 series, and we'll talk about the the Group 1 series, and we'll talk about the Group 2 series at the end of this piece. I'm just going to open with Karakia, she says. Kia horo te marino, kia whakapapa po namo te moana. Hei rahi mea tātou e te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou e tātou katoa. Kia ora, welcome everyone. As you can see, I am all on my own today, but I will hopefully do my best to guide us through some of the thoughts and feelings around the health curriculum, and at least draw your attention to some things to consider and how to go about engaging in this consultation process that, as I keep saying, finishes on Monday. So time is of the essence. I'm just going to explain how we'll go through things. So again, I'm going to take you to the main landing page for the health resources. I'll sort of orientate you around that, talk to you about the survey documents and the consultation, etc. And then we'll go back to the sort of summary snapshot where I have collated some thoughts from other people who have more expertise, certainly, than I in this area. And then I will invite Sue Parks, who's going to come and talk to us a little bit about nutrition. Thank you for that offer, Sue. And then just to kind of wrap it up with where to go in terms of getting your consultations in on time. All right, let's go to that main page now, and I'll just grab the link for you and pop it into the chat so you can follow along if you want to on your own screen. Okay, all right, so this is the main landing page for Phase 5, Health as a Subject through 11 to 13. As I said, here again, what I've done is try to pop some of these specific questions into the survey. Down here, if you just to quickly review, at the top here, you'll find this will take us to the snapshot summary document that I mentioned before. This will take us to the learning area, and this to the survey document. At the end of this as well, I've got a link back to the Phase 1 to 4 resources, so the materials that I put together, and the webinar material that I put together for the Phase 1 to 4. So you can go back and have a little revise and think, and maybe just to see what, potentially this Phase 5 is building on. And I've also popped a link into some resources that are created through sexual wellbeing on Let's Talk Sex Education. It's another resource that's got some thoughts and feelings around the draft health curriculum and how you might want to frame up your feedback. Okay. Let's begin, she says, by, the first thing I want to talk to before we get stuck into looking at this document specifically is just around the consultation survey document. So I'm just going to take a minute to do that. I discovered today that it does seem that, I'm just going to turn that up so you can see it. It discovered today that actually the survey decides whether or not which bits of the questions you get to see based on what role you pick. So if you say I'm a secondary teacher, it'll give you particular questions. If you say I'm a member of the public, it'll give you particular questions. They are not consistent. So the questions that I thought I was working off as the consistent questions are not correct. And I literally discovered that today because they have posted a PDF which lists all of the questions that you might potentially get a choice of, or not your choice of, which will be assigned to you onto the Taharangi website when it talked about the launch of the Group 2 subjects today. So what I noticed was there were 43 questions on that PDF document that you are to look at to prepare. But when you actually go to do the SurveyMonkey through this system, you will get different questions based on what you choose, what role you choose. Now, I have gone back to the refresh email today to ask them how can I complete all 43 questions if I really wanted to, and just to kind of question, how clear that is to people. If you're supposed to be using this PDF version that you can see, and I can take you to that. If you're supposed to be using that version to prepare your submission, only to then find you actually can't answer those questions. So just to be clear about what I'm speaking around. You see? Oh no, that took me the wrong way. Okay, never mind. So when you go into, as I said, when you go into the survey document, it will give you the questions based on who you tell it that you are. And so that's a little bit tricky. Again, what I will say is that you do have space at the end of all the survey documents to survey questions, regardless of which questions you get, to upload your own feedback and to make a sort of longer form comment. That they all seem to have a sort of, do you have any extra additional thoughts? And so that's definitely the place to put anything else that you didn't get to say in whatever survey questions you ended up getting. But yes, I felt pretty silly today when I found that out. So my apologies. And we'll move forward with the group 2 webinars with that new knowledge. Okay, so we'll now move to looking more concretely at the comments around the summary, snapshot summary on Health 11 to 13. And I should say that the remaining health and physical education drafts have come out today, and we will move to do some sessions on those shortly. All right, so the questioning begins as ever with the pathway visual. Similarly, it seems like the pathway visual might be useful. It does seem to, again, and this is similar to what we've had in other sessions, people talking about, it really depends on whether or not you're thinking of a career and it's being kind of driven by this academic kind of job pathway, as opposed to conceiving of health education as something that serves a wider purpose and supporting students' well-being. So, these pathway planners, I think, can be useful if that's what you're looking to go into and you're curious to think about careers in the health education fields. But for a number of students, that might not be it. It's not necessarily speaking to those students about other opportunities. Does it represent the associated knowledge and practice? Again, there was kind of a disconnect here between some of the statements around this kind of holistic nature of health, and then the fragmented ways that the strands are structured. So the health curriculum is structured into physical health, mental health, and then sort of social health. So very kind of 3 different strands. And there's a real concern that doesn't reflect the interconnected nature of those things and of health. And similarly, the sort of knowledge being sort of compartmentalized doesn't allow for really reflecting how those understandings are integrated and how they work in the real world. That tends to, and that undermines, I guess, that holistic understanding of health and separating all of these things out. I did also think, interestingly, the practice statements were quite skimpy, and this is my own observation of looking at it again today, that there was quite a lot in the knowledge columns, but the practices didn't have a great deal of detail in places. There was a lot of space. And yeah, maybe not giving the guidance that some of the other learning areas have in that particular part. Subject description, does it align well with the knowledge and practice statements? Again, this is this disconnection that we've seen in other learning in other subjects, that there's a statement of intent that sounds pretty good, and then actually in the enactment it's not there. So the interconnectedness, the sort of well-being focus is missing in the actual knowledge and practice statements, and it doesn't really marry up to that intention. And the contemporary nature as well, that this is not necessarily speaking to kind of the future of or health the contemporary issues that are facing young people in this space. And kind of that aspiration curriculum disconnect. I'm going to bring you in now. So if you would like, I'm just going to invite you while I'm thinking of it, and I'll keep going. But when you get this invitation, please jump in and join us. I should invite you to come and speak with us. All right, I'll carry on while Sue is joining in. The knowledge and practice statements are appropriate for the intended year level. Well, this was sort of an area which the contributors were not sure. It was a bit of yes and no. Some of the content they felt was quite simplistic in the senior secondary and not giving enough detail. If you got, it's kind of like there's a lot of good detail in some spaces, but then not in others. So this idea that there was sort of lack of development on some what I felt key places for future focused health education, relationships, communication, your online context, and that those were kind of undercooked and not recognizing the complexity of these issues in modern life. And I think that's another thing we've seen a little bit too with the other subject areas, a sort of retrofitting of curriculum. I can hear Sue is making an appearance.
Sorry, I didn't see the button below.
All right, no worries. Let me just finish my little thing, and then I'll turn to you. Okay, and then the last comment here about the knowledge and practice statements, just that it's not accounting for the diversity of students or a breadth of kind of experiences and challenges. So it's sort of that narrowing of the content in lots of ways to very simple kind of spaces and places. All right, I'll turn to you, Sue. Would you like to talk to us about what your feelings are on the health curriculum?
Thank you, Claire. There's 3 strands, and then there's 9 elements to be covered. And basically, if you look at the model of 120 hours, that works out about 12 hours plus assessment time per element, which if you bring it down to nutrition, that's 12 hours to cover everything that they have there in nutrition, which is impossible. One of my concerns is that it's very hypothetical. Also, it's very deficit model. And topic obesity, they've been taboo for quite some time because you could actually end up with more issues in the classroom if you're talking about obesity, because you're going to have kids that are obese in the classroom. Also, the focus on poverty, and I would hate to be teaching in a low equity index school where there is a lot of poverty, and you're teaching poverty you're basically reinforcing that they're in poverty. That has come through quite clearly from the people that I've discussed. Talked to. When I look at face year 11 under practices, this is tapu in many cultures and religions that you have sexual and reproductive health and nutrition in one statement. And already there's been quite a few people have been making jokes about that. That's how you could interpret that. So there's it's not a very coherent statement at all. At year 13, there's basically no nutrition at all. It's just looking at various, if I remember, because it's a wee while. Yeah, it's looking at a whole lot of diseases. Once again, which is, as I said before, it's deficit. The problem, the research shows if you're to understand nutrition, it must be applied, not hypothetical, which means right now that in year level 1, level 2, level 3, they can do practical to support their learning. This is completely removed from the curriculum, and it doesn't correlate across to food technology or hospitality, despite what the Ministry of Education have written to me and have stated in the media. The other thing is that the World Health definition they've used is only partial of the definition, because the World Health definition does include nutrition. So it's we are struggling with it being selective to focus on health in a narrow lens rather than a very conceptual lens. Maybe someone got some questions. I've got a croaky voice today, so sorry about that. My grandson gave me a cold, was giving me a cold.
Right. You're embodying complexities of health at times.
Yeah.
So I think you've hit a couple of things that, again, I thought was interesting around the practices that are talking about in the knowledge and practices session, and that, the sort of whole section on disciplinary writing and how you would write about health.
Yeah.
And there seems to be a real gap in describing many other practices and skills and what have you that learners would be using. It's kind of like, the language there is quite vague, and sort of they're going to evaluate things and they'll think about things but how they're actually going to do them, or the processes by which they would engage with this material, the only thing they are talking about really does seem to be writing and reading. Yeah.
And if you look at the 3 domains of learning, the behavioural one, it's to learn, you need to apply it in multiple situations rather than just writing. And I know for me, for example, I learn by doing. I do and write at the same time, but if I just write, I don't learn. And many of our, especially our neurodivergent children, that's how they learn. So once again, I think a sector of our community will be disadvantaged from this very prescriptive writing discipline.
Linda's question we've got here is around the concept of hauora being erased from the year 1 to 10 curriculum. Is this the same in the senior curriculum? Yes, that's interesting, Linda. There's one reference that I think I found one reference to it in this particular document, and I know this is a space that's probably, it'll be interesting to see what lands with the Group 2 health and PE material that arrived today, to see where hauora is situated there. But yeah, it's very, very kind of, it's there, but in a very minimal way. I think the other thing to recognise, and I apologise for not stating this at the beginning, but again, this Phase 5 draft has been written whilst Phase 1 to 4 ostensibly remains in a draft, so not, so hard to see what the progression would be or how this relates across. I know, Lisa, you looked at the draft 1 to 4, so you can kind of based on that, given that that's still unsettled territory. But yeah, there's a mention of it in here, but it's certainly not got the kind of weight that hauora had in previous curriculum.
If you look at the knowledge column in all the 3 areas, it's kind of doesn't actually connect to the practices. It's just a whole lot of facts or ideas, but it doesn't. When we were looking at it, they didn't actually connect across to the practices.
It might be worth actually just showing you this really quickly, right? Because I can see they put.
I heard today that they now realise that Phase 1 to 4 does not align with Phase 5, and they're fixing that up. Exactly.
I wonder what there is. Okay, I will move on. I'll just show everyone very briefly, for those who haven't seen it, the what the health document looks like they were actually talking about. I can see the other ones have been caught up now, and I won't get waylaid into that, but let me just share this with you so that you can see what we're talking to. She says, window. There we go. That one. So what Sue's drawing attention to there is the, hang on, I'm scrolling.
Down to the,
Yeah, so this is a bit about writing, which was the most, I think, complete part about what people would be doing. And then the subject structure here is, physical health, mental health, social well-being. And to answer your question, Linda, the hauora is...
It's back up. You've gone past it. Yeah.
Yeah. In Indigenous approaches, it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. But it doesn't connect across to practices.
Yeah. And again, this is quite typical of some of the things
Mm.
we've seen, that there's a bunch of stuff not a bunch of content, very content heavy, and then no kind of follow through or connective tissue as to how these things would work in practice. And similarly, as you can see, Te Whare Tapawha is there as well as a model, as one model, but not in the kind of centralized position as a bicultural honouring curriculum that we've seen in previous. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go back to where we were before, and there we go. All right, lovely, Rachel. That's wonderful to hear some a different perspective. And if you have a link for the NZHEA support materials, I would welcome that, and we can pop that into the material for people to look at. All right, I'll go back to where we are with our particular unpacking. Where were we? All right, so dun, dun, dun. All right, so we were at, I think, knowledge and practice statements, the sequence. So again, this is, I think, what you were saying before, so around the fragmentation.
Yeah.
So this lack of cumulative evidence, the evidence across the learning years. And I mean, this again, probably tricky to say around how the key learning is carried through or not carried through, given that phase 1 to 4 is out. But I suppose from what people have seen, this is the feeling. And then that kind of conceptual scaffolding. Can you talk to that at all, Sue?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening. Someone just
That's
sent
right.
me a message. Sorry.
That's all right. Just to talk about that kind of lack of maybe of conceptual progression around things. So maybe that was what you were saying a little with the lack of nutrition at year 13, that doesn't build. It just kind of changes tack entirely.
Well, if you look at year 13, there's nothing there at all. It's all like that, talking about different disease approaches to health and discuss the strengths and limitation of these contrasting approaches. But it's not actually mentioning, there's no nutrition at all mentioned in year 13. We don't see it there at all.
All right. I'm going to, the time is ticking away, so I'm just going to whisk down. The content that was felt that was missing, and this is very much coming from that sort of relationship sex education space, is talking about, relationship context, the online environment. There's, this is again, I think people were thinking about the responses that they'd had about what young people wanted in their health education, feeling here that it's not been adequately addressed around how to, work within online relationship environments. And, I guess the complexities that young people are navigating in different, the issue of AI, AI relationship chatbots, the shifting of kind of sexual norms, gender identity, social contexts. And so that kind of real world relevance for our young people, there's some feeling that's potentially missing. The last one here is it inclusive and accessible? The feeling here was, yes, that some of it is. There is some flexibility, but again, sort of the fragmentation is a big issue, and the kind of prescriptive nature of things. The structure might support the learners, but it is still orientated in that kind of academic realm. How is it going to work for diversity of our learners? And I think you spoke to that as well. So in terms of, as you said, kind of how is it deficit framing, and therefore how is that going to impact on young people when you're working in those spaces? And then that limited connection to students' lives. I think one of the things that's interesting, that's not reflected necessarily in this resource, but was a conversation I had, was about, I guess, what elements of relationship sexuality education people wanted to be in like consent education being a compulsory component. And obviously at the moment, as I understand, this year 11 health is not a compulsory element of the, it's not a mandated subject. So how do those things, how does that sit within this framing of secondary education. And I do recognize in places it's talked about, health and physical education there were some responsibilities to that across all learning areas, but I don't know how well that's being addressed by the other subjects or how much of that has been thought about in terms of making, elements of these things accessible to all learners, regardless of whether or not they take health education as a subject. So in summary, there's some concerns around, again, I think the fragmentation is a big one. I think some content area gaps and that kind of relevance to lived experience. And I think as you have identified, Sue, maybe the kind of practical elements too, like the pedagogical and the practices that our teachers would use to work with this content and the kind of limited guidance around that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that now and we'll go back into the chat. Oh, thank you, Rachel, for that. So Rachel Dixon there has provided some other material that unpack the draft as a curriculum for you guys to have a look at. So please do that. And if you're happy for me, Rachel, I might pop that link in as well into the resource before I push it out on the website so people have got that other opportunity to engage with it. Thank you, Sue, for popping in at this 11th hour. It was really lovely not to be sort of alone here. And thank you everyone who's come to the session today. As ever, it will all go up on Substack very shortly. It will all go up onto the draft phase 5 bigger webpage where I'm putting all of the materials from English, maths, science, social sciences, and we will plan to launch into looking at the group 2 that just dropped today. As I understand it, those drafts have gone out for consultation officially today, and that consultation finishes on the 8th of July. So again, a very short turnaround for us to work with, but we will do our best. And thank you for your engagement, and go and check everything out. I will just close. Thank you again, Sue. I'll just close with karakia. Kia tātou rangimārie, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Thank you, everybody. Ka kite.